when the pandemic hit, I had film in my fridge. I bought chemicals. All the labs were closed, so I couldn't kind of process film. I bought chemicals. I bought that enlarger that I have here in the back. And I started to go for walks as just to ease yourself of everything that was happening. My parents are in Chile. My brother's far away here in Canada in another place. My wife's family is back in Chile as well. I was seeing a lot of anxiety in their environment, in my own household, but also with friends. People wanted to move away from the city. A lot of anxiety, like for everything that was happening, that it was a common thing throughout the world.
Yeah.
And the only way to kind of release that anxiety or being able to balance it somehow was going out for walks. The only way to kind of keep myself busy was coming back, processing film right away. Sometimes like 4 rolls, 5 rolls, and scanning them right away. And every day that was a constant thing. Every day I was seeing the same things. There was a certain repetition. There was a certain tension in the environment, but also like, again, with the anxiety and everything that I was kind of seeing from other people. And I call it frequency because of that kind of notion of, repetition in terms of what I was seeing, the conversations that I was having, everything that was happening, that it felt like that was never going to end.
Why pick the name Frequency? What does that mean to you? Why is that the title?
So most of the photographs on Frequency started when the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And I think in 2019, I did a project called On Trial that it was kind of an evolution from a project that maybe started in 2016 or 15. And that's when I started to bring back black and white photography into my practice. And I say bring back because I was doing it before, but I never kind of got into it. There was something in it that maybe I wasn't doing it right. I'm not even sure if I'm doing it right at the moment, but and I when the pandemic hit, here in Canada we had the flexibility, to move around. Not in groups, but with your household, but you can still like go out, and I'm lucky enough to be living, a kilometer away from the Lake Ontario, but I'm also in between a river that goes to the Lake Ontario that has creek and forest, and one of the big parks of Toronto, which is called High Park, that also have like ponds and forest. So I'm kind of in between a lot of nature. And when the pandemic hit, I had film in my fridge. I bought chemicals. All the labs were closed, so I couldn't kind of process film. I bought chemicals. I bought that enlarger that I have here in the back. And I started to go for walks as just to ease yourself of everything that was happening. My parents are in Chile. My brother's far away here in Canada in another place. My wife's family is back in Chile as well. I was seeing a lot of anxiety in their environment, in my own household, but also with friends. People wanted to move away from the city. A lot of anxiety, like for everything that was happening, that it was a common thing throughout the world.
Yeah.
And the only way to kind of release that anxiety or being able to balance it somehow was going out for walks. And that was also because like my commercial work stopped, for a few months. So we ended up like going for walks, me and Carolina, most of the time, for like 2 or 3 hours, mostly around my environment. And the only way to kind of keep myself busy was coming back, processing film right away. Sometimes like 4 rolls, 5 rolls, and scanning them right away. And sometimes like use the enlarger here, this space is the basement of my house, and it's my full studio. So this becomes a dark room, like turn off the lights, change the mood. It becomes a dark room sometimes, and it's also my design office or it's kind of a mixed space. And this is where I was most of the time, or walking. And every day that was a constant thing. Every day I was seeing the same things. There was a certain repetition. There was a certain tension in the environment, but also again with the anxiety and everything that was kind of seen from other people. And I call it frequency because of that kind of notion of, repetition in terms of what I was seeing, the conversations that I was having, everything that was happening, that it felt like that was never going to end. But also my own kind of process, going out for long walks, coming back, processing film, scanning film, next day, same thing. Without necessarily seeing results right away, but that started to build up. And then I started to kind of print and see certain connections. So for me, it became kind of obvious that frequency or something around those lines was the name, because I felt that kind of it groups all these elements that were important in terms of kind of the building of the project. And the project itself speaks about, the tension and the conflicts that people were having about, how we live, what was happening, the way we build a certain, architecture or urban environment or system, and the way that we live, that becomes kind of repetitive. And when things like this happen, we feel kind of very vulnerable. Going from the urban environment into nature and seeing how nature, kind of reheals itself without necessarily having a patch, and we are kind of patching our houses, patching the streets, adding something that becomes not necessarily permanent, but within, if there's a hole in the sidewalk, we need to patch it, and then that hole is gonna stay there for 5 years, and then we need to do it again, or turn it apart and do it all over again to make it livable for us, within our system. And nature heals itself, no matter what, it just heals itself. So going into nature became kind of this escape from that kind of tension, that kind of conflict that was happening in the environment. And I think what I try to do with frequency is kind of allow those images to communicate that sensibility. But that's how kind of the name came about.
All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look at those images, and let's. You did a great job setting it up. So this is a selection of images from frequency. The amount of work that I made was I think it was around 600, 700 photographs, which obviously not all of them are good. But I also have something in my head that, there's a reason why you take images, and I try to basically scan everything high res. So I have a very big archive of work, and I go back to the images, and sometimes they become something else, or they trigger another idea or things like that, even if it's a not good image. But obviously the book has a selection of images. They're not all of them here on my website, but they're all black and white. And one of the reasons is what I was saying before, I'm only developing black and white photographs in my space, and everything was closed in terms of labs. So that became kind of a limitation that I put into my process. And that also helped to, I guess, create a certain language. What I was focusing was empty spaces, tension within architecture. But again, empty spaces is kind of also strange to say, because most of the spaces were empty in the streets, no matter what. But throughout the pandemic, but it was kind of strange. Yeah, it was weird.
Blocked doors, or traces of human intervention or traces of different kinds in architecture or, in concrete or in walls. Everything that in a way create a certain tension or spoke about this conflict of how we live. But also like sometimes, animals that were in the street, that were all the things that was seen in the streets, but somehow they were taking over spaces that were empty. Like what you see here in this image that is the, the entrance of a store space that was closed for a long time. And, again, this idea of patches and how we have to kind of heal or try to heal our own architecture to be able to live. And here you'll see, bricks over bricks in a wall, that are kind of falling apart. So you see a little bit of memory here, you see history, but you also understand how we are repurposing our own architecture to make it, feasible for us to live. And there's certain obviously repetition in certain pictures, and I like that idea, repetition, which speaks about this idea of frequency that you can see maybe more in the book rather than selection of images that are here, that I worked as diptychs in the book, or images like this, that speak about this relationship between nature and architecture, but also how unfriendly sometimes architecture becomes, visually, but also, like this space that you see here that is very, brutalist and a lot of concrete, not big windows, so there's not a lot of light, and how that tension speaks to itself, or kind of the dialogue between the two elements in nature and those and that kind of architecture, or abandoned spaces.
I'm going to jump in. You were talking about the black and white, using black and white, and you said you don't even know if you do it right. It's kind of a change. To me, I think you're doing it great. What was challenging for you? Why do you feel like that? Why do you feel like it's different? I'm curious.
From color, you mean?
Yeah.
I think the making it more homogeneous in terms of language from image to image. Some images, I mean, they have more contrast than others. Depends on the light. If it's a cloudy day, if it's a sunny day, etc. But I think I started to focus on the essence of the image, or what I was looking at, rather than being caught up with this image is way too saturated, or the colors here were too bright, or and just those aspects became somehow. It's funny because they became somehow more. I don't want to say fake or false, because the reality is color. It's not, we don't see things black and white, but I don't know. It's hard to say, to be honest. It's hard for me to explain it. There's something about this, and don't get me wrong. I love color, and lately I've been just looking at color images back again. But it's not that I don't like black and white anymore. It's just, it comes and goes. It also depends on the project that
I would agree with you.
I think I work in both languages, but this one maybe was also kind of the dance of the environment that within those years that communicated better through black and white. But I was also being honest, with the limitations that I was having within my process. Just going back to this idea of the pandemic, like I keep on mentioning the pandemic because most of the pictures were made within those years. But for me, this project is not necessarily about the pandemic. It's not about COVID. It was made during that era. It was made, and it was inspired maybe by the sensation of what or what maybe we realized about how we were living. But I think that aspect has always been there. Like we became more aware of how we live in the period of time, and I think it speaks more towards that rather than this idea of COVID. I don't know if that makes sense, but going back to your question, I'm not really sure if I can really understand honestly kind of the difference for me between color or black and white.
I think to you, what I was really kind of driving is sometimes a color image has a different feeling for me when I look at it than a black and white one does, and often I'll look at an image and go, that I love the highlights and the shadows, and I think that would be way better as a black and white, just aesthetically, but also it invokes a different feeling. And you tapped into it a little bit. You tapped in. You eliminate the color and you kind of get right to the subject, and it's that's a good point. And living in those limitations, you kind of have this as your way of making, and so. It also kind of talks about the stripped away nature. There's so much buried in there. It's so good.
Yeah. But I'm also like, with going back to graphic design, with graphic design, you use so many tools and you use the computer a lot, and allow myself to, make an image black and white if I wanted to. With my photography, I use my limitations. I use, for instance, 2 cameras, one large format with one lens and one medium format with one lens. I don't change the lens. I use 2 types of film. I might change because of the price right now, but I was using, Kodak Portra 400, and I was using Kodak Tri-X 400. And I never, transform a color image into a black and white. If that photograph doesn't work for me in color, it's not necessary that I'm gonna go back and take that photograph again with a black and white film. I just don't do it, and it just doesn't work, and I normally, for the most part, I take one photograph, like this scene that we're looking at here. I just took one photograph and I continue walking. So and that became part of my practice. There's certain photographs, that I might think, okay, I might take like 2 photographs of this from different points of view, different angles, but there's a purpose there. I don't take, this specific, image twice to see which one will work better. And I think I don't question that anymore. It just became kind of a purpose within my own practice. And so those kind of limitations between kind of the cameras that I use to the film that I use to taking just one photograph, is part of the honesty within my own process that I kind of like, and I kind of got used to it. And I say like this with complete transparency. Like sometimes I might not be, too. I might have photographs that are terrible in terms of composition, in terms of light, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that honesty, and there's very few times where I take a photograph and maybe the results I'm not 100% happy with, and I go back another day with a better light or to take the photograph again. I think I can count with my hands, the amount of times throughout the years that I've done that. So going back to this idea of like color, black and white, I'm also like being honest with that. Like sometimes it just works for me, and I don't think I have a deeper, explanation of why that is. Sometimes I might get bored of color and I try black and white. Sometimes I get bored of black and white and I may try color, and it's no more deeper than that. And in this case, it became this because of the limitations of labs being closed. I didn't even try to process color, and it was easier and faster to process black and white. It was, the chemicals that I was able to afford. And even though my larger can print color, I haven't tried it yet. I've just done black and white. enlarge photographs in with that machine. So I was kind of using those limitations, and I was fine with that. I just continued with the process, and I made that process work. Again, that doesn't mean that I can try something else, a year from now. But yeah, I mean, forms, alternations within the architecture, and that kind of relationship with the environment or nature, in a way, and just sometimes images that were abstract enough to make you think, emptiness, or images that might have like different connotation or different kind of interpretation. But I also I don't necessarily like to explain each one of the images. And I think every time that my images are most of the time numbered or called untitled, because I like also the viewer to have their own interpretation into the image rather than me writing a caption and having a description of the image. There's images like this one that that speak about this idea of patches and blocking things, but they're also they're beautiful, and it even becomes more like a sculptural aspect to it within architecture or the way that we live, and there's things that I randomly found in my walks that might speak directly into the text that, for instance, Monica wrote about, that was nurtured from conversations that I had with her, the same way that we're having this conversation about the work. And she did a really good job in kind of writing about it and describing kind of maybe what I was feeling. Probably a better job than what I would do. But more or less is that, or again, just escaping into nature. That forests, and how forests are also intervened by human. They have human intervention, but they heal themselves, or they adapt themselves to the environment in weird ways like this. That I have no idea why this happened, but this speaks about this idea of adaptation, and how nature adapts itself by itself with no. Even if we put, a building next to it, they might go around the building and just, looking for light, and just by that action, they allow themselves to live, so things like that are the things that I was looking at, looking at houses, how we live, the way that we structure our places, and how nature becomes part of that. Obviously, this is a reflection of my environment here. I know that, not every house around the world is like this, in terms of space, in terms of how we live, in terms of, the size of the house, etc. But it's a reflection. Another photograph that speaks about this idea of, adaptation. But what I like about this photograph that I think is very obvious is this kind of relationship to human or to touching, or that it was kind of forbidden within that period, but somehow we felt more, in terms of kind of the human interaction, we felt more connected, even though we were not connected, and I say that because maybe I was speaking more deeply with my friends, and speaking about feelings, and speaking about, with my family, or speaking about, what was worrying each other. And that was reflected, in the way that we were living, in the things that were happening. And, seeing details like this, like how also trees communicate within each other. And again, they heal themselves and they allow themselves to live, or I believe within the roots, they communicate each other, they share nutrients, These images spoke to that somehow.
I can't help but get a sense of this word "do it yourself," that you talked about in your younger years. It's almost like you're finding that do it yourself resourcefulness. You're still looking for it, and that's what draws your eyes. I can't help but think about that. I guess it was a garage door, that makeshift garage door with all these iron gates, and it seems like you're kind of being drawn to stuff like that. Would you agree with that, or do you think I'm just kind of looking too far into it?
No, I think I am. And with that, to vernacular or empty spaces or things I've been kind of rethought of, I'm always drawn into that, and I might have a selection of images that don't belong to anything that might be, about things like that. That maybe at some point they'll become something or not. But I think, and it's even within the way that I lived, and we live as a family. I think it might be also a way of how I'm gonna say folklore, but it's not folklore. It's more like how people in Chile kind of do things. Like, for instance, details like if you need to fix the water in the house, you call the person that lives in your next block. You don't call this company like here in Canada that charge you more than you could have thought of, because there's a company built for that. Or you could do it your own. You could do it yourself. Or my dad used to come and fix it, with his knowledge, or he just learned. There's a lack of resources sometimes that force you to understand or understand how things work, or forces you to find solutions. That is also DIY, and it's outside of the artistic practice, and it becomes sometimes part of your own practice or your own way of living. Not with everything, obviously, but maybe it's part of that as well. My dad used to, had a woods studio in our backyard. So he built sometimes furniture for the house, or fix things in the house, or and I never thought of this connection sometimes, but my grandfather used to had like a printer studio in the backyard that I remember when I was in high school. I used to work with him a little bit my last year of high school, and that became a big printer of the family, of my grandfather's family in Chile, afterwards. But it all starts from a very kind of raw state sometimes. So maybe there's something about that. I don't know.
I'm seeing a connection. This is the first time because... What's that?
No, because of what you mentioned, I'm seeing this connection. I never thought about this before.
Yeah. Well, it's as much as we say we're not making personal work, we can't help it.
People, of course.
It's always our perspective. It's always comes from our upbringing and where we come from, and like this, these interventions that we actually bring to our space, and it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna flip through the images here. I think I'm hoping that I explained what they are, but
of course, no. And people can go to your website too if they want to kind of take a longer look at them. But you said you put this in together as a book?
I did. If you scroll down here, you can see images of the book. So on 2021, I won in Canada. There's a part of the Contact Festival. There's an open call to win a grant to create a book, and I won which is called the Bertinsky Grant, and it's sponsored by Edward Bertinsky, which is a very famous Canadian photographer. So I won with this book, with Frequency, the Bertinsky Grant in 2021. And it became a book early this year. So it took me a while, but it became a book
Congratulations.
this year.
Congratulations.
that was part of it. A very a very important push for me to make that book. And thankfully, it wasn't a big run. It was 100 copies. Thankfully, got sold out. I think there's a couple of copies in two places. One is in Europe, in Mi Camera, in Italy, in Milan. They might have one or two copies, and they might have one or two copies at the Canadian Centre of Architecture in Montreal.
Okay.
They have a bookstore.
So if anybody wants these, they're going to have to. They're just, you got to be in Milan. Well, if they still have it,
you can order them online. I think there's might be one or two copies on each one of those two places, but those are the only copies. Okay. I don't think I'll print it again.
Well, here you can see the diptychs. You can see the diptychs that you were talking about, how you're putting them side by side and how you're having conversations with them. Did you design this, or did you have someone help you with it?
No, I designed this one. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah, I designed it. So there are diptychs like this or like this one over here. There's a little detail here. Job. But
how big is the book? Is it
the book? The size is 8 and 7.5 inches by 10 and a
like I have it in printer paper here. Kind of size.
Yeah, I have a physical copy here with me.
There you go. So
you can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
With Swiss binding and a flap.
Yeah.
And with this book, like I was also interested in kind of waste. So I'm just gonna jump into here. Like I did this 3 volumes of with all the wasted paper at the printer. Like I saw the amount of wasted paper of tests and things like that, and I basically asked them like, let's make like just 3 books and crop them randomly. I made a quick edit in 20 minutes just in one of their boardrooms and said like, okay, let's do these 3 groups, and it was, I guess, kind of a graphic design exercise to its unique, copies. But also it's interesting how sometimes the images become something else, and the connection between them becomes something else. And I have them here with me in these 3 volumes, which they're very, they're very.
They're remind me of old phone books.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you open them up anywhere, and sometimes you see relationships that again you never thought of, or repetitions. So I like to do those little things as well that are just artist book, one edition of 1 copy, but they're important for me as part of my own process, where kind of there's a bridge between kind of photographs and the book form and graphic design, and it's part of my own kind of, as you were saying, like DIY or experimental approach, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about it is that you're thinking about a photograph as an object, and then when you start to like crop them, and it gives it new meaning, it kind of takes it to another level, which is just fascinating. You also have did you also have a sound piece that went along with this?
Yeah, so I had a solo exhibition in Chile in a gallery called Galeria Animal, which is 3 rooms of the gallery. And in this room, I had like fine art prints and silver gelatin prints and big prints in newspaper that were folded and expanded. So here's just a selection of those images, of that exhibition. But within the exhibition, I collaborate with a good friend called Justin Pape, which is one of my best friends here. And he has a studio here in Toronto on the east end of Toronto, in a building that is going to be demolished. And he works with a lot with materials, build his own materials, work a little with the sculpture and wood, and also a graphic designer, but also creates music. So he's a multidisciplinary artist. And within the pandemic, he did an album of music, but also he's been doing like this little sculptures that are made of bricks of buildings that are being demolished throughout the city. There's a lot of kind of heritage buildings being demolished to create like condominiums. So there's a big problem here. And he created these little sculptures that are hosting a cassette tape on the back. That cassette tape is has I think it's 6 tracks or 10 tracks of his music that are basically sound recordings of improvisation from him playing guitar with like environmental recordings. And he invited me to collaborate with him on this limited edition run of silver gelatin prints that are being hosted within these cassette tapes. So each one of the tapes, you could buy them. I think it was an edition of 10, each one of them, with like silver gelatin prints, like a paste in this sculptural hosting a cassette tape. And the sculptures themselves were like, they have this memory of like, the environment of these bricks being found on the streets, but also like, I think there's hair of Justin grown throughout the years of the pandemic, mixed with the bricks and other materials to create this kind of new material that became each one of these sculptures. That each one of them is very unique. So they're projects like this that are very kind of DIY, that have a memory aspect to it, has the memory or the elements of the city. There's a collaborative
repurposing, reusing.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Of collaboration with my friend Justin, and he ended up.
The images are yours.
The photographs are mine. Are part of Frequency. Are images that were not shot within the same process, printed by me in a silver gelatin, in my darkroom, and put here into this sculpture element. And with his music. So when I had this exhibition, I asked him like if he could actually record, do a piece inspired from this cassette tape, but made into one unique audio piece that is 24 minutes and 34 seconds long, that was playing as a loop in the exhibition. So in a way, I was bringing to Chile part of that environment as well, because there's a lot of kind of sound recordings from the environment in the city here and around Ontario that was part of that. So you were looking at the photographs, and sometimes you were hearing like sounds of cities here in Ontario that became important part of the exhibition. And you can hear that here in my website as well.
I think that's if any of our audience is interested, go to his website and take a listen to that. And that's a really cool. I love it when I see artists collaborate. I have a theory that I'm not quite sure about, but I think the next big great works are not going to be solo works. They're going to be collaborations, and I love it when two worlds and two thinking come together to kind of, you're making a multimedia piece there, and I love it. It's wonderful.
No, I really like that. I don't know if I do it enough. I kind of do it enough, but like my photo practice is very solitary. But when these things happen, I think it's wonderful. Yeah, it's exciting, and the outcome. Yeah. I don't think either of us knew exactly how the outcome was going to be. And even though everything is small runs and very independent, we're very happy with the exercise of just doing it. It's very interesting in terms of a collaboration, in terms of our own relationship, and again, great to just work with friends and have like just two different minds collaborating.